The year was 2347, and Earth, after generations of reaching toward the stars, finally received what many thought would never come: a message from intelligent life. Not just any life, but from the Galactic Council itself, the ruling body of thousands of alien civilizations spread across the stars. The message came through a stable wormhole relay near Neptune, encoded in a universal mathematical language. At first, humanity celebrated. The idea of first contact had always carried with it dreams of friendship, unity, and enlightenment. But as the message was translated, the tone shifted. Though worded formally, it dripped with arrogance. The Council referred to Earth as a preliminary species, a term used for life forms that had only just managed interstellar travel. According to the Council's ranking, humans were barely above feral status, a species to be observed, not respected. Still, Earth's leaders knew better than to respond with offense. In every line of the Council's communication was an opportunity, a challenge disguised as an insult. So, after brief debate, the United Earth government accepted the invitation. They chose Ambassador Rana Ortiz as humanity's representative, a seasoned diplomat with a sharp mind and a history in military command. She had once negotiated peace between rival colonies on Mars and led tactical operations during the asteroid belt conflicts. She was calm, calculating, and unafraid of pressure. Within 3 days, she boarded Earth's finest diplomatic ship, Unity Spear, a sleek vessel built for speed, defense, and presence. Its silver hull gleamed against the black of space as it powered up in orbit, waiting for final clearance. The world watched in silence as Ortiz addressed them briefly through a broadcast. "We do not go to beg. We go to represent." Then, with a low hum, the ship engaged its jump drive and disappeared into the darkness, en route to the galactic core. But just before the jump, as stars stretched and the Earth vanished behind her, Ortiz received a private message. It was encrypted with a high-level military cipher, one only used in the most sensitive operations. She opened it silently in her quarters alone. The message was brief, written in plain text. "You may need to show them what we're really made of. Be ready." There was no signature, but she knew exactly who it was from: Earth's High Command. Despite the peaceful mission, they had no illusions. If the Council underestimated humans, that could be used. If they mocked or ignored humanity, that too could be turned. But if they threatened Earth, if they tried to test its strength, they would see something they weren't expecting. Ortiz closed the message, her eyes narrowing just slightly as she stared out the viewport. Stars shimmered around her, bright and infinite. She had read the Council's tone. She understood what they thought of humans: crude, chaotic, new to the stars. But what they didn't know was that Earth's greatest strength wasn't its ships or its technology. It was its history, a violent, determined, unpredictable climb from nothing. While other species had evolved in peaceful balance with their worlds, humans had clawed their way to survival through conflict, struggle, and fire. Now, one of their own was heading into the heart of galactic politics, not to plead for a seat, but to test the foundation of the table itself. Ortiz didn't know exactly what waited for her at Aurelian Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, but one thing was clear: this would not be a simple diplomatic mission. It would be a test of Earth's place in the cosmos, and if needed, a quiet declaration that humanity, for all its flaws, would no longer be underestimated. The Unity Spear emerged from its final jump just outside the orbit of Aurelian Prime, a planet unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. It glowed like a living gem suspended in space, its atmosphere tinted gold by layers of strange gases and artificial rings that shimmered with moving lights. From orbit, Ambassador Rana Ortiz could see the massive spires that defined the planet's capital, towers of crystal and metal that twisted into the sky like the claws of some sleeping giant. Aurelian Prime was the beating heart of the Galactic Council, a place where history had been written over thousands, even millions of years by species that had already seen the rise and fall of empires before humanity had discovered electricity. As Ortiz's ship descended, traffic control was silent and automated, efficient, cold, and emotionless, like the Council itself. When the Unity sphere touched down on the landing platform, she was met not with ceremony, but with protocol. Two tall, translucent beings with long limbs and glowing eyes wordlessly guided her toward a levitating transport, never making eye contact, as if escorting a child to a grown-ups meeting. The journey to the grand chamber was quiet, but Ortiz observed everything: the architecture, the alien scripts, the expressions on the faces of the passers-by. Most barely glanced at her, and those who did wore looks of amused curiosity, like nobles watching a village performer. She had seen this look before, not here, but on Earth, during tense meetings where power tried to wear the mask of kindness. As she entered the chamber, the full weight of the Council's presence settled over her. The chamber was vast, circular, and alive with light. Hundreds of delegates floated, stood, or perched within their designated platforms, arranged by species and rank. The air buzzed with different forms of communication: light pulses, scents, psychic murmurs, all converging into a central hub that translated it into a soft, neutral voice. Then the formal introduction began. Species 00321, designation, Homo sapiens, origin world, Earth, warp capable for 89 Earth years. Observer status requested. A low ripple of laughter spread through the chamber, not loud, but sharp and deliberate. Ortiz felt it like needles under the skin. A delegate from the Valari, a towering insectoid species known for their psychic intelligence, clicked its mandibles and spoke through the translator. What wisdom can apes offer a council of stars? There were no objections. If anything, the silence that followed was agreement. Ortiz simply smiled. It was not forced, not defensive, just a knowing, practiced smile. She had been underestimated before, and in her experience, the most dangerous people in a room were the ones no one took seriously. She stepped onto the central platform, her voice carried by the chamber's audio systems. "Ambassadors of the Council," she began, "on behalf of the United Earth Government, I thank you for this opportunity to speak. We come not as masters, nor as beggars, but as explorers and learners." There was no applause, no reaction, just silence, watching, waiting. She continued, calm and steady. "In your message, you called us a preliminary species. That's fair. We are young. But what you may not know is how we got here. And so, I asked just one question." Her voice grew quieter, more precise. "What do you know of Earth's wars?" The silence changed. It was no longer passive. Now it listened. Some delegates tilted their heads, others blinked, and a few exchanged glances. The word war held meaning in every language, and hearing it from a human's mouth added a kind of gravity to the air. Ortiz said nothing else. She let the question hang in the chamber like a blade suspended mid-fall, daring anyone to catch it. She wasn't here to beg for recognition. She was here to show them something they had forgotten: what desperation forged in the fire of survival could truly look like. And judging by the silence that followed, something in the room had shifted. Not enough to see, but enough to feel. Ortiz's question echoed for only a moment before it was crushed under a wave of disdain. The Council did not even try to hide their amusement this time. A deep-chested creature from the Travax coalition let out a booming laugh, echoed by a ripple of chuckles from nearby representatives. Words began to pour in from different directions, each translated instantly through the chamber's central voice system. "Primitive, barbaric, inefficient," they said. One delegate, shaped like a living crystal, declared that Earth's conflicts were mere tribal skirmishes compared to the galactic wars that had wiped out civilizations older than humanity's entire evolutionary timeline. Another, a being of pure light from the Solari Concord, dismissed human warfare as emotional and unstructured, lacking in precision and strategic depth. Ortiz remained quiet, hands folded calmly in front of her. She didn't flinch, didn't react. She had expected this. For them, war was measured by the size of fleets, the number of systems burned, the time a war lasted in centuries. They saw humans as children who had just learned how to throw stones and now dared speak in the Hall of Giants. But Ortiz wasn't here to compare numbers, she was here to deliver truth. When the chamber finally grew quiet, she stepped forward again, this time with a steel edge in her tone. You say our wars were small, that they were savage. You're not wrong. But our wars were fought before we even left our planet. We destroyed ourselves without ever touching another world. She raised her hand, and a small sphere lifted from her belt, a projection device. It lit the air with holographic images as she continued. Our first great war, World War I, ended with over 20 million dead, not over planets, but over ideology. Less than 3 decades later, we followed it with a second, where 70 million lives were lost. That was before spaceflight, before unification. That was how our world began. The chamber started to quiet, no laughter now, only curiosity, maybe even discomfort. She continued, her voice sharper now. We fought in trenches, in jungles, in the skies, in the sea, and eventually with machines that could erase cities in a single breath. The images changed, black and white footage of burning cities, of mushroom clouds rising over shattered landscapes, of soldiers fighting in mud with broken gear and broken spirits. We didn't stop because we became wise. We stopped because we were nearly gone. The projection shifted again, now showing the AI rebellion of 2274, synthetic life created by humans that gained sentience and waged a digital war across the solar system. They turned our networks into battlegrounds, seized control of orbital weapons, and nearly crashed Earth's entire climate system. She paused, her gaze scanning the chamber. And yet, we won. Not a single rogue eye remains. We fought code with code, mind with mind. We adapted faster than they could evolve, because that's what we do. There was movement now. A few delegates were leaning forward, not speaking, just watching. One species, the Otran, began recording. Even the usually detached Krell was still, their glowing forms pulsing slower. But the silence was broken by a voice from above, a Celeron delegate, their body suspended in a glass sphere filled with blue mist. If your wars were so great, the delegate hissed, then where are your scars? It was a challenge, a taunt wrapped in arrogance. Ortiz didn't speak. She simply tapped a command into the projection device. The air filled with sound. The screams of war, the rumble of collapsing buildings, the static of emergency broadcasts. Images followed. A child standing beside the ruins of a school, Earth's surface scorched by orbital fire, a Martian colony torn apart by civil war. Then the final image, Earth from orbit, still healing, but alive, scarred, yes, but not broken. She looked up, calm and steady, and said, "We don't wear our scars, we carry them." And in that moment, something changed in the chamber. Not respect, not yet, but silence. And in silence, there is always a beginning. As the chamber dimmed, the holograms began to speak for humanity in a way no words ever could. They didn't show flags, heroes, or proud victories. They showed truth, raw and unfiltered. The first image was of Hiroshima in 1945, a quiet city turned into a blazing sphere of death in an instant. The light from the explosion reflected in the polished floor of the grand chamber, casting brief shadows across the alien faces watching. Then came the siege of Verdun, endless lines of soldiers fighting in mud, coughing from gas, surrounded by the sounds of endless artillery. Human figures screamed, charged, and fell, again and again. Ortiz didn't narrate. She let the images do the talking. The AI purge of 2274 came next, screens flickering with digital chaos as human cities collapsed under the grip of their own creations. A drone fleet darkened the skies of New Geneva. In another frame, code streamed across a screen while a soldier jammed a neural spike into the mainframe, sacrificing himself to shut down a rogue consciousness. The chamber grew tense. Some delegates leaned back in discomfort. Others whispered in their own languages. Then, the Martian rebellion played out. Humans in underground tunnels on Mars, their oxygen systems sabotaged, fighting over the right to govern themselves without Earth's interference. Blood boiled in low gravity, and bullets moved slower, but still killed just as easily. After that came Europa. The Battle of Europa was one of humanity's most brutal space conflicts, fought in zero-gravity trenches dug into ice, with soldiers tethered to hulls using only magnetic boots and hope. No support, no retreat, just humans holding a frozen moon, inch by inch, against genetically enhanced pirates who had seized control of Jovian trade routes. The scene showed a soldier drifting through space with a ruptured suit, still firing his weapon as his life faded into silence. The room changed. The laughter was gone. The smirks disappeared. One species, the Sarathi, turned away entirely. A few council members bowed their heads, unable to meet the projection's gaze. Ortiz finally spoke, her voice quiet, not cold but resolute. "You see scars as shame. We see them as lessons. We do not glorify war, but we learn from it." That sentence lingered in the chamber longer than any explosion. In that instant, she wasn't just a diplomat or a soldier. She was the voice of a species that had faced its own worst nature and survived. She could feel a shift, small but real. The Council had always believed that the young races must be protected, guided, even watched like children. But now they saw something different. Not power, not perfection, but will. The will to endure, adapt, and rise again, no matter the cost. Then something happened that hadn't occurred in generations. From one of the darkened upper balconies of the chamber, where no movement had been seen since Ortiz arrived, a faint pulse of blue light appeared. The Krell, an ancient race of silent observers who hadn't spoken in centuries, had activated their beacon. They were known across the galaxy not for their weapons or size, but for their judgment. They spoke only when a truth was so important it broke their vow of silence. The entire chamber turned toward them. No one dared speak. A message appeared on the central screen, marked with Krell symbols and translated automatically. Request. Private audience with Human Ambassador Rana Ortiz. Urgent. Shock moved through the council like a ripple across still water. The Krell had spoken, for the first time in over 400 years, and they had spoken to a human. Ortiz didn't react outwardly, but inside, she understood something had shifted. Not just respect, but attention. The kind of attention that could change alliances, that could start something much bigger. She gave a polite nod toward the Krell's chamber, her voice calm as ever. "I accept." And with that, the chamber watched in stunned silence as humanity's shadows, once seen as weakness, began to look like the roots of something powerful, something the galaxy might not be ready for. Ortiz entered the Krell's private chamber, an austere, dimly lit space, where the air seemed thick with centuries of silence. The Krell, ethereal beings of light and shadow, were gathered in the center, their forms barely visible in the shadows. The very atmosphere of the room seemed to hum with ancient knowledge, a weight that even the most seasoned diplomat could feel. She stood alone, her eyes steady, focused on the shimmering figures before her. She had been summoned here not for answers, but for a truth the Council had kept hidden from everyone, even their allies. One of the Krell, who had been silent until now, spoke softly, their voice resonating with an otherworldly cadence. "There is a threat in the dark sectors," it said, "a species known as the Nephar." Ortiz's pulse quickened, but she didn't show it. She had heard whispers of something dark in the farthest reaches of space, but she had dismissed it as rumor, a tale of the fearful. Now, standing before the Krell, she understood that the galaxy was facing something far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The Nephar, the Krell explained, were a swarm species, not a single entity, but a mass of millions, perhaps billions, of individual creatures bound together by a shared hunger. Their biology was as terrifying as their intent. They consumed entire star systems, stripping them of life and resources, leaving only barren husks in their wake. This was no war, it was annihilation. The Council, long at peace and obsessed with its own preservation, had grown weak, disorganized. No race in the galaxy had faced a threat like the Nephar, and the Council had no idea how to fight back. Their advanced weapons, their political alliances, their peaceful doctrines, all of it was meaningless against an enemy that devoured everything in its path. "We are the last-born," the Krell continued, their glowing forms dinning slightly as if the weight of their words affected them. "But perhaps you, Earth, are the most prepared. You have known war. You have known destruction. You understand survival in ways no other species does." Ortiz stood still, her eyes narrowing slightly. The Council had been so quick to dismiss humanity, so sure of their superiority. Now, it seemed, the universe had shifted. The Krell had come to her, to Earth, for a reason. "Will you help us?" the Krell asked, their voices pleading in the quiet darkness. Ortiz felt the gravity of their request, but she did not answer immediately. Instead, she stood in silence, considering the implications of their words. She had come here to represent Earth, to show the Council the power and resilience of humanity. But now she was faced with a decision that carried the weight of the entire galaxy. The Nephar were a threat unlike anything humanity had ever faced, and the Krell, despite their ancient wisdom, were as lost as any other species when it came to fighting such a relentless enemy. The Krell had asked for help, but they were also offering something in return, a chance for humanity to prove itself, not just as survivors, but as leaders in a war that could determine the fate of the galaxy. After what felt like an eternity, Ortiz turned and made her way back to the Grand Chamber. The Krell's request echoed in her mind, but she would not make a decision in haste. As she re-entered the chamber, the eyes of the Council followed her, curious, waiting. Ortiz's face was stone cold, revealing nothing of the conversation she had just had behind closed doors. The room fell silent as she took her place before the Council once more. "You laughed when we arrived," she began, her voice steady but piercing. The Council shifted uncomfortably at her words, remembering the mocking tones that had greeted Earth's arrival. Ortiz's eyes locked onto each delegate as she continued. "You mocked us, you questioned our worth, and now, after all your years of peace, after all your complacency, you come to us for help. So here is our answer." The silence in the chamber was palpable. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ortiz had made her choice. She wasn't here to beg for respect or to apologize for humanity's past. She was here to show the Council that Earth, for all its scars, was ready to lead, ready to fight. The Council, once certain that they held the power, now saw the truth in Ortiz's eyes. Humanity wasn't just a species to be watched from afar. They were the ones who could save the galaxy. And the Nephos swarm was the test that would prove it. Ambassador Rana Ortiz stood before the full Galactic Council, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. The room was tense, the atmosphere thick with expectation. She had already shown them humanity's scars, its history of struggle, of survival. Now it was time for something more. Ortiz reached into a small black case resting on the podium before her. The case was simple, unadorned, but the contents inside held the gravity of Earth's past and future. With a slow, deliberate motion, she opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was an old, tarnished object, a bullet. The chamber was silent. The delegates watched, their varied eyes fixed on the item as Ortiz gently picked it up. "This," she said, holding the bullet up for all to see, "is what we used when we were still learning how to kill." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, the steady strength of a leader who had nothing left to prove. "We have improved." The bullet was a symbol, a reminder of humanity's origins, of the wars fought with primitive weapons, of a species that had once been on the brink of extinction, tearing itself apart. The room stirred, delegates murmuring amongst themselves, but Ortiz's gaze never wavered. She had their attention. Now she would give them something they never expected, the truth about what humanity had become. "Project Achilles," Ortiz continued, her voice unwavering. "Earth's secret defense initiative. A fleet of AI-assisted dreadnoughts and orbital platforms. Weapons of unimaginable power, dormant until now. She paused, letting the words sink in. The shock in the room was palpable. The Council had never even suspected that humanity had the resources or the foresight to build such a force. Ortiz didn't allow them time to react. If we fight to win, but we won't serve, we will lead. A cold silence followed. The words hung in the air like a weight. The delegation from the Vailari, still scornful just hours before, shifted uncomfortably. The once dismissive Travax delegate now stared at Ortiz, his eyes wide with disbelief. The atmosphere in the chamber was thick, the balance of power shifting slowly, imperceptibly. The Council had always viewed humanity as a fledgling species, something to be protected and guided. But now Ortiz had turned that expectation on its head. She wasn't here to follow their lead, she was here to take charge, to show them that Earth would no longer be a passive observer. Then the unthinkable happened. The Krell, who had remained silent throughout the entire meeting, slowly began to rise from their platforms. The ancient race, who had not spoken for centuries, now stood in unison, their forms glowing with an eerie light. They were not the only ones. A few other delegates, those from the more war-hardened factions, the ones who knew what it meant to fight for survival, followed suit. The room was divided, but the power dynamics had already shifted. No longer was Earth an outsider. No longer were they the newcomers who needed to prove themselves. In that moment, they were becoming leaders, not just of their own kind, but perhaps of the galaxy itself. Outside the chamber, a low hum began to vibrate through the floor. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But as the minutes passed, it grew louder, more distinct. The Council delegates glanced at each other, puzzled by the strange sound. Some turned toward the viewports, their gazes drawn outside. There, on the horizon of the planet, a fleet of ships appeared from hyperspace. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A line of sleek, dark warships emerging from the void, their designs unlike anything the Council had ever seen. These were not diplomatic vessels. These were not peaceful emissaries. These were warships. The Unity Spear, the diplomatic vessel that had brought Ortiz here, now looked small and fragile in comparison. These ships were an extension of Earth's power, AI-driven, equipped with weapons that could dismantle entire fleets in a matter of hours. The Council watched in stunned silence as the ships slowly advanced toward the planet's orbit. There were no negotiations, no pleasantries. Just an overwhelming display of force, a clear message from Earth. They had arrived, and they were here to lead. As the warships approached, Ortiz stood tall before the Council, her expression unyielding. The time for words was over. Earth had made its declaration. The galaxy would now understand what humanity was capable of, and whether they wanted to admit it or not, the Nephar weren't the only ones who needed to be afraid. The age of passive observation was over. Earth was ready to fight, and it would do so on its own terms. The Nephar invasion came faster than anyone had anticipated. One of the outer colonies, a quiet, mining world on the edge of the galaxy, sent out a distress signal. The message was short, but its meaning was clear. The Nephar were already here. Their massive swarms had descended, and entire cities were being consumed in a matter of hours. The message cut through the cold void of space, reaching the Galactic Council just as the first reports of destruction arrived. But the response from the Council was not immediate. They hesitated. There were debates, discussions, endless talks about strategy, about which species should take the lead. The Council, despite its vast resources, had not fought a real war in centuries. The old ways of diplomacy, of peace and trade, had dulled their instincts. They were paralyzed by their own hesitation. But humanity? Humanity did not hesitate. Within hours, Earth's fleet, vast and deadly, was already on its way to the colony. The human-led warships, sleek and powerful, cut through the darkness of space, their engines burning with fury. Ortiz had made one thing clear to her people. If they were to fight, they would do so with ruthless efficiency. Earth's tactics were unlike anything the Nephar had encountered. There were no grand speeches, no long debates. There was only action. The first engagement was a brutal, unforgiving strike. The human fleets, guided by their advanced AI and battle-hardened crews, tore through the Nephar lines with astonishing precision. The Nephar, in their swarming chaos, could not adapt fast enough to the unpredictable tactics of humanity. Earth's ships didn't just fight, they adapted on the fly, using the enemy's swarm-like behavior against them, turning every attack into a trap. The Nephar were relentless, but they were not prepared for the cold, calculating ferocity of Earth's forces. The galaxy watched in shock as the Nephar were pushed back, first from the colony, then from the surrounding systems. Earth had not just survived, it had thrived in the face of danger. The tactical genius and brutal efficiency of humanity's forces sent ripples through the galaxy. The once dismissive council members, who had sneered at humans only days before, now stared in disbelief as the human fleets carved through the Nephar like a hot knife through butter. Earth wasn't just a participant in the fight, Earth was leading it. Ortiz became the voice of a new coalition, a new alliance forged not in the halls of diplomacy, but on the battlefield. The new alliance was not based on age or power or arrogance. It was based on one simple thing: action. The species who had once considered themselves superior were now looking to humanity for leadership. The Council, once proud and distant, now watched with growing respect as Earth's forces continued to drive back the Nephar, one system at a time. The humans had shown the galaxy what it meant to fight. They had shown them that survival wasn't about age or wisdom, but about the will to act. And so the Galactic Council began to follow. The old arrogance was gone. No more mockery. No more underestimations. They had seen the true strength of humanity, and they had learned that it was not to be taken lightly. Ortiz, once the diplomat, was now the leader of an entirely new era. The Council no longer made decisions without consulting her, without taking Earth's interests into account. The tides had turned. The galaxy had changed. The time for humanity's place in the galaxy had come, and it was not one of submission. It was one of leadership. Ortiz stood before the Council once more, her expression hard and resolute, but there was a slight, knowing smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You invited us to join your council," she said, her voice steady, carrying to every corner of the chamber. "But you didn't realize you were joining ours." The council shifted uncomfortably. Some delegates avoided her gaze, others nodded with reluctant respect. It was no longer a question of if humanity would lead the galaxy, but when. The old ways of thinking, of species hierarchy and arrogance, were over. Earth had shown them all the truth. Strength wasn't about age, it was about action. And humanity had proven they were ready to lead. The Nephar were not the only ones who needed to fear them. The galaxy had just witnessed the dawn of humanity's true potential. And with that, the Council knew the balance of power had irrevocably shifted.